This episode is sponsored by Claude, the AI for minds that don't stop at good enough. This is Pretty Much Pop, a culture podcast, not in the stars to hold our destinies, but in ourselves. Today we're discussing Chloe Zhao's Oscar-nominated film Hamnet, based on the 2020 novel by Maggie O'Farrell, in the context of media about Shakespeare's biography. This is Mark Linsenmeyer. Hey, out, damn spot!
Wow.
This is Al Baker, and there is no movie either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
I'm Sarahlyn Bruck. Hey, Mark, I have a question for you. Where does a pig land after it's been shot out of a cannon?
Where, Sarah?
Hamnet. I'll just see myself out.
That is one of the worst jokes I've ever heard in my entire life.
Ooh, you have no idea.
Unbelievably bad. This is Lawrence Ware emotionally devastated, and I do mean devastated, in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
It was a moving end to the film. I think this is a film where that tells you what's going to happen right at the beginning. It doesn't tell you exactly like that's going to be the final scene. And I wasn't sure. I actually did get through the book. We had a little extra time. So I listened to the audio of the book, and it's not exactly the same final scene, but it's still, the whole thing is about Shakespeare's son dying and then how Hamlet, the play, was written later. So you would maybe expect that some of the end would be from the play. I wouldn't necessarily expect that it would be just a straight, rather lengthy reading from the play, and that it would be so emotionally devastating given the context.
I want to take issue right away with you talking about the end as the source of emotional devastation, because the whole thing...
It's so gutting. The entire movie is gutting.
After the first act, and one of the first things I want to say about this movie, I didn't read the book, so I'm interested to know if the book is structured at all the same way. But the movie comes in 5 acts and is structured as a tragedy, and that's smart just to begin with.
Right. The end was not devastating. It was uplifting. If it had just, because like when
it was cathartic in a way that tragedy needs to be.
When the dying part is actually happening, I'm like, where is this goddamn thing going? And in fact, someone that I was watching it with, even before the dying started happening, left the theater because she was like, this is not for me. This is not...
It's not fun viewing.
It's just a big bummer.
This is not a feel-good historical romantic period drama. No.
Well, this was sort of my idea. I read the book, and it was a huge book. It came out in 2020, and I was sort of late to the party. And I finally read it last year, and I absolutely fell in love with this book as an examination of grief and how loss changes you. And I thought that Chloe Zhao did a great job in the film of actually really capturing that, because the book itself, there's not a ton of dialogue. There's not a ton of dialogue in the movie either. And it's so interior. I wasn't sure how they were going to be able to pull it off. And just the subject matter is so upsetting, devastating. Yes. And I wasn't sure how she was going to be able to do it. And I know that this film has been divisive to a certain degree.
It might be divisive on this podcast. We'll see.
It might be divisive on this podcast. And I'm wondering how I loved the movie. I deeply loved the book. I wondered if you guys liked it.
I absolutely love this film. I think it's genuinely brilliant. Hearing you describe the book just clarifies for me that it is as good as I think it is, because I came away from the movie thinking like, yeah, this is a film about grief, and it's a film about human tragedy and how that relates to dramatic tragedy through the lens of the experience of grief. That's the thesis of the movie. It's beautifully expressed. It's really clear. And the fact that Chloe Zhao took that directly from the pages of the book just confirms that she's thought deeply about the material and that the choices are deliberate, as they seem to be. I mean, I referred to the 5-act structure of the film. The whole thing is filled with allusions to the relationships between Shakespearean drama and the human tragedy that's unfolding on the screen. Like the fact that Shakespeare runs into the room 5 minutes too late to say goodbye to his son. right? That's a textbook tragic moment. And the fact that like the first 15 minutes is just a delightful love story and nothing's going to go wrong. And it clearly sets up the tragic flaws of both of the protagonists. And as Mark said, you know exactly where the story is going to go. Same thing's true in a dramatic tragedy. A tragedy isn't about surprising, awful things happening, and those are gut-wrenching. It's about exploring the horrific inevitability of what was always going to happen. And this movie does all of those things. It's incredibly literate, as well as being beautifully moving.
My sense is that people like us, and I know film critics, have seen the film, but not very many regular people have seen the film. So do we want to do like a sketch of what this film is? Because I feel like we jumped into the themes.
Did I not just give that? Or add what Al said. So, right. The book actually moves in parallel. So it's right just when Hamnet is going to die. So it is a lot of interior monologue about Hamnet.
Well, who's Hamnet? Who's Hamnet? Who is
Hamnet? The child, the boy, the son, one of the twins of Shakespeare.
Of Shakespeare. Okay, yeah, exactly. I just don't think that people will be clear. Yeah.
And his wife, Agnes. It's really about Agnes, not so much about Will.
It is Agnes's story. It is Agnes's story. It is, yeah.
The book goes back and forth such that then all this beginning of the film of Shakespeare and his wife getting together and all that stuff, that's all
Shakespeare in
flashback.
Love, some might say.
Yes, that's all flashback.
Another Oscar-winning film. Sorry, go ahead.
And it doesn't really even announce very clearly often, are we sort of in the present or are we in... the children are being born now. It's just a matter of like, well, you can figure it out by what's happening. Is Hamnet around in the scene or not? Are they married or not? It's pretty obvious, but it's not announced in a very overt way. At least I wasn't looking at the page. I don't know if there's a different font or something. I doubt it. But in the book, it proceeds more or less chronologically, and they get rid of the device in the book is we're never going to call Shakespeare by name.
Yeah.
And we're really going to try to sideline him as much as possible so that it's not about, there are a few scenes that are from his point of view, like he is rushing home when he hears his daughter is sick. In the movie, they don't really take that care. It is still mostly about Agnes, but it is... there's plenty of Shakespeare in there. There's plenty of focusing on the kids. I guess the book gets filled out more by filling out more of the other family members, her brother and her relationship to her brother and his relationship. They mention like Shakespeare's father being a bad guy and you better watch out Hamnet if he's in one of his moods or he might whap you. But they don't really... it's not even very well developed in the book, frankly, but it's more developed than we get on the screen. But that's not really necessary. So the emotional heart of it is just this romance, these children being born, when the twins are born. I heard this was modeled after Taming of the Shrew, the romance, so that she is like a wild,
that's right,
witchy woman that Shakespeare is in essence taming. To live a I don't know, but a civilized life. When she goes to have her first child, which she they have to get married because she's pregnant. She goes to the forest to have it because she's just that kind of gal. She wants to go to the forest when she's going to have the second child that ends up being twins. Isn't able to get there. So, is there like a curse on this child? She's had this foretelling that she's going to only have 2 children by her bed when she dies. But yet now she's had twins. So
or 2 figures. It was 2 figures.
2 figures, yes. Now she's had twins. Clearly one of them is going to die. And it seems like it's going to be the girl because she was born all little scummy and they think maybe she's dead.
They didn't even think she was alive. Yeah.
I don't know. Should I be giving this much detail of the plot?
No, I think the detail's good because again, here we have I just wanted to point out another motif from Shakespearean tragedies, the foretelling, the reading of which affects the events that the foretelling describes.
One big difference in the novel from the movie is that the title of Hamnet it's actually Hamnet, a novel of the plague. And there's a big section in the book about how the plague finds this family. And it starts off in Alexandria, a monkey gets bitten by a flea and then it travels, it follows the infection from Egypt all the way up into Venice and then on a boat, and it eventually reaches the sister and then finally reaches Hamnet, obviously. And so as a reader, you're following this along, knowing exactly what's going to happen as a result of this, which again, that foreshadowing is so great. But it was also, it read almost like an adventure tale. It was like it was like a thriller almost. The pacing was so quick and you're following how this happens. And I think that what Maggie O'Farrell does in this novel, and I think what Chloe Zhao does really brilliantly in the movie, is it shows, we're all told that it was so common, 1 out of 3 kids would be expected to die at some point. Mothers would die in childbirth, and we're seeing this over and over again. And you would think, maybe they don't get so close to these kids because they know that something could happen at any second. Maggie O'Farrell talks about how she just never bought into that. You never get over the loss of a child. And I loved that in the story, you could really see that in Agnes losing her mother in childbirth and how that affected her daughter. Will's mother lost 3 children, I believe, out of 8, and how that affected her and her parenting decisions. And it was just, this is nothing that people during this time threw away. This was something that they experienced just as devastatingly as we would today. And I thought that just made this story even more modern and connective. And again, probably the reason why I was weeping through an hour and a half of that movie is because it's everyone's worst nightmare, no matter when you live.
So you don't think that take on grief was anachronistic? Which is fine if it is, but...
I read a really good piece of criticism which spoke to exactly this point and talked about what's anachronistic is the public display and acknowledgement of grief, which the characters have. Because one of the, as Sarah very rightly said, people had this idea that families weren't terribly emotionally attached to their children in the Middle Ages and Renaissance. But that's because there aren't public records of public displays of grief, because the emotional culture was different. So the grief isn't anachronistic, but the displays of grief are anachronistic. Obviously, the way the last scene plays out is anachronistic, but it's an expression of real feelings for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys noticed I haven't said very much about this film yet? I didn't like this film. I didn't like it.
Didn't?
Did not like it.
Okay.
I thought this would be a critical thing.
I'm going to be critical. Let me cook. Let me stew in a pot. Chloe Zhao is a very gifted filmmaker. Let me say that up front. She's very gifted. I thought that Nomadland was very good. I thought that it was very profound. I think that this film is very well directed. I think that she did a really good job on this film. However, I'm wondering if this film is artistically interesting or if it's grief porn. Because the prolonged sequences of just watching people sob, the first half of this film is incredibly slow. The pacing is laborious at times. The acting by Jessie Buckley is quite good, and she will win an Oscar for Best Actress for the film. And it's well-deserved. She did a good job. But I really struggled with this film, guys, because I felt the film wanting me to feel. I ended up sobbing, I ended up being very sad, but it felt manipulative, right? It felt as though the film was manipulating me and forcing me to feel these things instead of organically bringing these things out of me. I don't mind tragedy films. I don't mind Shakespeare's tragedy. In fact, they're some of my favorite films, but I prefer a film that organically brings these feelings out of me instead of what I felt this film was doing was like forcing me to get there, right? I mean, I'm a human being who is sympathetic. And so, of course, if I see someone sobbing and going through these emotions for a very long, prolonged period of time, I'm going to feel something, right? I didn't enjoy that part. I wondered if it needed to be done this way. Even though I recognize the brilliance of Zhao, I just wondered if it needed to be done this particular way because it felt manipulative. As I said, I had issues with the pacing. The acting is overall pretty good, but it just felt manipulative to me. And I don't like to be manipulated in films. And that's what it felt like this film was doing.
So, okay. I have heard that argument that some people feel that they've been manipulated into feeling sad during this movie. But what is the technique do you think that Zhao is pulling on you? And how do you think she should have done it instead with this story?
Yeah, I'm not a director. I don't know how she should have done it, so I can't speak to that.
That's the critics get out of jail free card.
No, it is not. That is not the critics get out of jail free card, because I'm not a director. Like, if I was a director, I would be directing. That is not my job. My job is to analyze the stuff that is in front of me. That is my job. Not to fix it, but to analyze it, right? That is my job as a critic. And what I saw was just, as I said, number one, the cinematography is very flat. I don't like the cinematography at all. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm a critic, dog.
No. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Why.
I just.
But that's offhand. Like, it has nothing to do with this. But the point though is that it just felt like she was lingering on things and just letting them sit there and just letting it happen and just in a prolonged way. Like, Titanic is a film, for example, that I think is a tragedy, but it doesn't manipulate you. Like, it's a tragedy that organically brings these feelings out of you. Now, I wouldn't say this is, this is not but it's an example of tragedy. And that happens organically, and you feel things organically. And then, there are some prolonged sequences where you kind of see them, but they're not overly wrought. It feels like this is overly wrought. It feels like you spend so much time just kind of wallowing in this grief. I understand that is the experience of people who have lived through this, who are going through this. And I didn't finish the book, but I understand that it's kind of what's going on in the book. That you are kind of sitting with someone, and it's hard to express the interiority of a character on film. I get that. However, I just thought that this was just way too manipulative. And I felt like it didn't do a good job of expressing the interiority of the film without forcing you, like literally forcing you to end up in the place where it wanted you to be emotionally. Now, Al's going to disagree with me. Go ahead, Al.
Really profoundly.
I know you are. It's okay.
Just to say up front, I don't think you're wrong about any of the formal features of the movie that you pointed to. I think they're all there, but I think they're all serving a purpose. And I'm going to ignore your point about Titanic, because I honestly think it's beneath you to suggest that Titanic is not manipulative. Which scene in this movie do you think is more manipulative than the I'm the king of the world moment? But
that's not manipulating you for the sake of making you cry.
Villainous bad guy. But charitably, I think what you're saying is basically there are huge lingering shots of very painful childbirths, dead children, and the movie forces you to sit with that for longer than it has to, and it's uncomfortable. And I can completely understand why that is off-putting, but I think manipulative is far too strong a term, because taking it at what it is trying to do, and I think pretty clearly it's trying to ground the scene in emotional reality. You could have the same information in a scene where someone's waiting outside the room, and then someone comes out of the room and says, the kid's dead, and we're all sad about it. And there's a huge swell of sad music, and that's a manipulative way to get a cry out of an audience. But
I think both are manipulative.
Sure. Yeah. But this movie, they force you to sit with it. And it happens for 2 scenes in a movie. And if you think that's too far, fine. But it's not unsubtle. And I think a charge of manipulation implies that they're pulling on that instead of making smarter choices. And I think they're doing that on their own terms as a smart choice. And my proof of this is that the emotional journey of the film is not just rooted in those really explicit, gruesome scenes. It's also rooted in the drama in between them. One of the most emotionally wrought scenes in the movie for me was when Agnes was talking to her brother about the fact that she felt like she was losing Shakespeare and she needed to give him up and let him go to London, even though she didn't want to do it. She sensed that kind of lust for greatness in him, and she knew that she needed to do it. And knowing what was coming, again, this is the drama of the tragedy coming in, knowing what was coming, knowing how it was all going to play out, that was heartbreaking.
Agreed.
So the movie is capable of subtle emotional turns. And I guess the point is, even if you don't like it when it bangs you over the head with something, which is totally fair, you've at least got to accept that that's an artistic choice and not reaching for a cheap shot because they can.
Yes, cheap. So cheesiness and manipulation, those are things I associate as being together. So say a Hallmark movie is all cheese and all manipulation but it's trying to get you to smile for the most part. So maybe that's okay. A horror movie, with jump scares. How much more manipulative can you get? Oh, but the fear is supposed to be fun. So maybe it's okay for something to be manipulating and cheesy if it is ultimately supposed to be fun and positive in some way, whereas you might feel like anything that is classified as grief porn is doing something. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah, take over.
No, we're speaking my language here. A classic movie that people think of as good, which I rewatch regularly, is also very manipulative and considered grief porn, which is Steel Magnolias, right?
That is absolute grief porn. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely, right? And it's not considered a Hallmark style type of movie. It's not genre like horror, but it is extremely manipulative. And I would not classify Hamnet as manipulative because I think the whole point of this storytelling is to force the viewer or the reader to sit in this grief. And it is an uncomfortable place to sit. And that's the point, is we need to sit with it and we need to watch it. We need to bear witness to this so that change by the end actually means something. Her going to go see Hamlet, the play, watch her husband play the ghost, the person who is supposed to die first actually does forever, as a work of art. That is the whole point. If we don't sit with the pain of watching her son die a really horrible, horrible, prolonged, painful death, the ending doesn't mean as much. And I understand why people don't want to sit with that. I don't want to sit with that every day either. I have to go in pretty prepared. But that's the whole point, is so that we can see that transition of both of those characters by the end.
Let's stop and have some sponsor talk. I have been hesitant to do much with AI. I'm certainly not going to write with it, but I recently tried using Claude, specifically the new Sonnet 4.5, as a thinking partner in trying to figure out some parts of Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, right? Notoriously difficult book. And I find that the results that Claude is giving me is just a nicely synthesized search of the web. So it's the very same sources, and you can just click back to see the sources that it's pulling from that I would be using if I was just searching the web on my own to better understand this, but making it much faster, much easier. And I can push back like I could with a conversation partner, say, I still don't quite understand this. I just laid out my thoughts in a detailed paragraph, searching for meaning, just like the way that I would if I was posting to a forum, trying to engage with academics. And it gave me pretty satisfying replies, trying to figure out what I was talking about, clarify my own thoughts, connect it up with the literature. Claude is the AI for minds that don't stop at good enough. It's the collaborator that actually understands your entire workflow and thinks with you. Whether you're debugging code at midnight or strategizing your next business move, Claude extends your thinking to tackle the problems that matter. So I'm going to continue to investigate this to help me figure out points of view to consider, articles to look at related to our Pretty Much Pop episodes here, and I'll let you know how it goes. Are you ready to tackle bigger problems? Get started with Claude today at claude.ai/PMP. That's claude.ai/PMP, and check out Claude Pro, which includes access to all the features mentioned to today's episode, claude.ai/PMP. This episode is also sponsored by Squarespace, a quick and easy way to get a premium website with all the tools you need to claim your domain, showcase your offerings, grow your brand, and get paid. This is a service that I really wish had been around when I was starting my various websites. I remember how difficult it was to figure out a color scheme, a font. I'm not that great with colors. Well, Squarespace has professionally designed and award-winning website templates, plus the new Blueprint AI, which will give you a fully custom website in just a few steps using basic information about your industry, your goals, your style. I have tried this. It comes up with really interesting design recommendations. You can have it generate premium quality content, right? So product descriptions, visual design effects, interesting ways to list what you offer. You don't have to have experience with any of this. And once you got your website, which could have videos, it could have a store, it could have a place where people can donate money. All problems that I faced and mostly failed to solve when I was designing my initial websites back in the 90s. Squarespace automatically optimizes the website to be indexed with meta descriptions, an auto-generated sitemap, the SEO tools, which will help you show up more often on search engines, get more eyes on your site. And they've got great analytics, so you can see what eyes have been on your site. Squarespace has tools for email campaigns, so you can get more eyes on your site. You got to check this out. Go to squarespace.com/pretty for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code PRETTY to save 10% on your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/pretty.
Let me respond. Al, I don't have much of a disagreement. Interestingly, me and Al kind of agree a lot of times, even though we don't like to agree, or we don't like to see that we're agreeing. Mark, let me respond to you first. The Hallmark movies are cheesy, and I think that they're bad. And so that is the whole point. The horror movies that really rely upon jump scares, those are movies that I watch and I enjoy, but I would never say that they're good. My favorite horror movies are things that are brooding, like The Shining, things like that. Those are my favorite films. So the jump scares and all kind of stuff, I mean, I agree with you. They're not good, whatever. All right, Sarah, let's have a conversation.
I think brooding is a good description for what Hamnet does in its dwelling on.
I don't know if it broods,
it's not a dark,
I mean,
the foreboding. It's not, it's not Coen Brothers. I watched the Coen Brothers Macbeth. We can talk about anyway later.
I actually like that movie.
The way that it builds a mood, I didn't have any problem with it. I thought that this would, be a critic's darling. And then I listened to the Slate Culture Gab Fest, and they were saying some of the same things you're saying, Lawrence, but even more so, that they felt like the most emotional music in the movie is a thing that has been used in a number of other movies.
Max Richter, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the use of Shakespeare quotes, which is very common for this kind of film, the other things that we're going to talk about in a minute here, but is not in the book at all. It's as if Shakespeare was just saying these things in real life to himself. To be or not to be? Should I kill myself? That he was doing that. And then he was like, hey, that's a good idea. I should write that down. That there's something inherently super cheesy about that the critics, I can see, not liking the inclusion of that in this film. It did not bother me. That particular thing.
It didn't bother me either.
It bothered me so much, but I'm not going to get into that because that point has been made by them.
I think that's fair, but I think it's a misreading of what that's supposed to be doing. It's drawing attention to the structural similarities between the story that's unfolding for you and Shakespearean tragedy.
It's just that my main issue is just, number one, I mean, you can tell me that this is not, but this feels very much like an Oscar-bait film. Like a film that is genetically designed to garner Oscar nominations, right? And it's going to win. Like it's a very weak Best Actress field. Jessie Buckley is almost certainly going to win this. If she doesn't win it, I'm going to be shocked. Chloe Zhao won't win a Best Director, and so I don't like Oscar bait. I don't like films that are made for the purposes of trying to win Oscars. I'm not going to say necessarily that it was, but it feels like an Oscar bait film. But back to the earlier point of just lingering and just sitting. I mean, okay, Sarah, like, give me one scene, right? One scene. Just give me one scene. This is a film that I'm never going to watch again. Like, I'm just never going to. Like, in what world am I going to sit down and choose to watch this and put myself through this emotional ringer? This is not enjoyable. It wasn't something that I enjoyed. I didn't like it. It felt overwrought. It felt like it was trying to get me to an emotional place that it ultimately got me there. But as I was crying, I was disgusted with myself for crying. And I was mad. I was mad at the filmmakers for making me cry, right? Because I don't mind crying in films. I don't mind tragedies. But like, don't force me there. Like, don't just put it on the screen, just let me linger. Of course I'm going to be emotional about dead kids. Of course I am. I'm a father. I'm going to see that. I'm going to relate that to my life. I'm going to think about my experience or how I would feel in that kind of situation. So of course I'm going to feel that. But I didn't like the film doing that to me. And I think that there are far more subtle ways that could have been expressed, that there are far more subtle ways that could have been shown. There have been many films, a plethora of films that deal with similar kind of subject matter. And they have been able to make that film without going into the direction that this film did. And so I didn't like it. I just didn't like it. I didn't like the experience of it. And, I am not going to begrudge her winning Best Actress because I think that she was genuinely good. And I think that Paul Mescal was very good. I mean, they were all good. The direction was good. I had some issues, but good. But I just didn't like this. I didn't like the artistic choices. And it felt like it was force feeding me these emotions instead of organically bringing these emotions out of me. And that's where I draw the line as a critic and as a human being.
I don't know that I want to watch Hamnet anytime soon either, but
or ever again.
But I don't want to see Schindler's List ever again either.
I agree. I agree. Well, no, I take that back. I actually enjoy the movie, but never. Go ahead.
But I mean, in saying that, and enjoying a movie is also kind of a fraught term. I really had to.
The audience can't hear your air quotes, but I've alerted them to that.
I don't know if wanting to do a rewatch of something means that something is good or bad necessarily. I definitely felt that this movie did what it set out to do. It had a really strong thesis statement. I did not think that the prolonged presentations of grief were Oscar-baity or for any other purpose other than to force the viewer to sit with that. And I thought that storytelling was really effective.
Agree, disagree.
Yeah, I don't know that dwelling on this particular.
I don't want to just fight about it. I mean, yeah, I agree. I mean, my point has been made. I liked the story. I did like the story. I really thought the story was good. I thought the story was important. I just would have made different choices in the presentation of the story. So my criticism is not one of the story, it's of the presentation, and I'll leave it there.
So what do we think about the end specifically? That in the book, she's going to see the play. She has these mixed emotions. She's how could the name of my child be put among your little tawdry characters? But then it's what Sarah said, that Shakespeare himself is playing the ghost of the father and is, able to say, and that's where it leaves it. Mm-hmm. Whereas what we saw in the theater was quite a lot of that scene, which was given a different emotional resonance. Like I've seen different versions of Hamlet where that's not a very emotional part of the show. It's right near the beginning. Like you're not supposed to it's sort of the what's the opening sting. I'm just thinking of these like a Doctor Who episode where somebody, they introduce the aliens and somebody gets killed or something. So it's like, hey, I'm the ghost. Here's a problem you have to solve. Like there's nothing. And then we're going to jump to, which is not in the book, the scene where Hamlet himself actually dies. And I'm sure that's given in the best performances of actual Hamlet, will also make you cry but that's at the point where she is so moved that she has to reach up and touch the guy on the stage. And the fourth wall is broken and the whole audience has this together moment that is just indescribable. I didn't find this manipulative, but I was like, wait a second, did you just use Shakespeare to accomplish your purpose as opposed to using your original dialogue? And you just became a cover band at the end here, giving a very creative interpretation. And, it was really effective, but man, there's something a little cheap about that.
I was going to ask how it diverged from the book because it's really interesting because the effect that then has is it makes the emotional arc of the story about a reconciliation of Agnes's grief with Shakespeare's grief.
Yes. As
opposed to in the book, which I assume just ends with the prospect of Agnes's grief being resolved with going to the play, right? Or how does that arc go?
It's much shorter. It's far more condensed at the end of the novel. Honestly, when I watched the movie, I didn't realize that there was going to be so much time devoted to this one last final scene, actually. But you do get a lot of the resolution. She does go to his room and sees that he's been living basically like a monk. He's not rich and he's not necessarily sleeping with all of these women. He's not living this glamorous life that she had thought. All of this also is, again, going on in her head. And so Chloe Zhao has to figure out how do we get what she's thinking out onto something that's a visual. And so she ended up, I heard her interviewed, I think, on the New York Times interview podcast. And she was talking about how she had her brother come with her so that she could actually talk about how this was all making her feel. And so I thought that was kind of a cool trick. But that wasn't actually what happened technically in the book, even though all of the emotionally everything is still there. But what was really great about the ending is that she got to really visualize how Agnes's grief and Will's grief, which was we didn't see and she didn't see, how they were able to come back together. And grief, again, is just an expression of love, and having them come back and connect again, and how they both were able to have that change together, which I thought was such a great, again, it's a grief story, it's a love story, and it's also a love story between these two people, which I thought was a great way to wrap it up. I thought it was just beautiful.
That's a really, really smart way of getting across that reconciliation when you don't have like the time to do her going to his rooms or the access to the inside of her head. That is very, very smart. The thing I really loved about the last scene was it really delivered a clear closing thesis statement to me for what the movie had been about. There's a particular shot where Agnes is watching the stage and there's some dialogue going on and she's focused in on the archway in the back of the stage where Shakespeare appears. Yeah. And they're talking about, I think they're doing literally From Whose Born No Traveller Returns, right? They're talking about death. And she's like, oh my God, things can stand for things. Like metaphors exist. This is a metaphor. This play is a metaphor. I can use this, because she's confused at the beginning about, exactly what you said, Sarah. She's confused about like, what does this have to do with my grief? What does this have to do with anything? What are these people even talking about? And then she sees that door and it's like, yeah, I get it. This is a vessel for my emotion. It's a vessel for Will's emotion. And then that hand waving closeness thing together at the end, I read that as, it's a maybe slightly overwrought metaphor for how wonderful art is through its ability to serve this function. And because I picked up for myself in my own viewing how consistently the movie was working through exactly this thesis and this point, it really closed off beautifully for me.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the arch was supposed to be the recap of the cave from the beginning, like the place that she likes to go and hang out and have children in the forest is next to this? This is the part that made me feel like it was brooding like a horror movie, because this image of this cave that sort of keeps coming back. It also is sort of like the elves and the hobbits going into the west. This just, these metaphors for death and, is there some sort of portal out of which we emerge and that we disappear back into? So, it wasn't like original particularly in that respect, but I thought it worked.
I thought it worked too.
The other thematic thing, little trick, we've spoiled every little bit of this, but still, I think you could go see it and you'll be fine. Like, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, this is not really spoilable, I don't think.
The fact that they're twins and they look like each other, and in fact, more is made of this in the book. Oh, it looks like fate. It looks like the death is coming for the girl, but he's gonna, in the movie, he's like, I'm gonna take your place. I'm gonna fool death. I'm gonna, wheedle in next to you. And the actors don't look enough similar as they're depicted in the book, so that when they put on each other's clothes, you don't actually think that, they're just being silly. But they're depicted as like basically identical twins, except they're different genders, so they can't be identical twins. And they're different sizes, that the girl is very undernourished. And there's a great passage in the book where their mother is realizing who is actually sick now. Her daughter was sick, and now she sees this mass. She thinks she's just seeing her daughter on the slab, and instead she sees this mass of limbs and realizes steadily that this is actually, either one Lovecraftian creature or two of them, that they're, and actually she was confused about which one was sick. And that was worth the price of admission alone. I wasn't in love with the book overall. Mm-hmm. The whole Hamnet wandering around trying to find somebody when he sees that his sister is sick. This is how the whole book starts. And there's quite a bit of time where he's walking around and like, why isn't mom here? What is mom doing? Mom's taking care of the bees. And the way that it introduces the city, I don't know. It took me a while to get into the book. I wasn't in love. If I were not doing this for this show, I don't know that I would have finished it.
I liked that we got to know Hamnet actually in the book a little bit more. We got to care about this character. And again, it's that foreshadowing. We know what's going to happen to him. So I actually liked that part. I liked that we got to know him and how close he was with Judith, and just, their relationship also, and finding the kittens and all of that. I thought was just, we got to know him, and again, that just made his death even more devastating as a reader.
In the book, the falcon just disappears. There's no falcon funeral.
No falcon funeral.
That's a good scene.
No, I know.
Can we shift gears in our remaining time here? I didn't think we'd be so full of passion about this movie that I thought maybe we'd talk more generally for a while. But the reason that this is fascinating is because we just know so little about the life of Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. When I was sort of researching this, half of what I was finding was, well, is it really Shakespeare that wrote it? Which don't really interest me. I don't know. Did anybody see these movies? Like there's a 2011 one with Jarek Jacobi called Anonymous. That's like, Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford, actually wrote all these plays, but you're not allowed to write as a nobleman. You know, that's low commoner work. So, you know, that's the tragedy is he never got it just seemed silly.
I mean, also Francis Bacon would like a word if you think that like writing is a peasant's activity. It's absolute nonsense. And it's just classism. It's always been classism. It's just toffee-nosed scholars refusing to believe that middle-class Glover from the West Midlands could be a great dramatist.
And that movie, if I remember, was directed like a quasi-action conspiracy movie.
We've all been played. I just watched the trailer today.
It's not a very good film at all.
It's like the guy who directed Band of Brothers wrote it.
It is, yeah.
Or like that wrote Band of Brothers.
And I think that the guy who did Independence Day either directed it or produced it. It is all over the place, that movie.
We had a little discussion in the after talk just about sort of our attitude toward Shakespeare's position in the culture, which we don't necessarily need to repeat. But part of what came out of that is, hey, let's just focus on Shakespeare biography stuff, which was Sarah's initial idea in the first place, rather than like maybe we'll have a future episode where we'll watch all the Shakespeare modern adaptations or whatever that we can stomach.
Well, we could pick even one play like Lear throughout the ages, you know, which actually could be really fun.
I mean, having this extra time, we ended up having an extra week before this recording this, that I did watch the Apple TV Denzel Washington, Joel Cohen Macbeth, which of course, you know, it seems like it was delivered up to me, and just being able to turn the subtitles on, that makes so much difference to me because I feel like Shakespeare's plays are meant to be read. You do not understand them. I don't understand them, at least, if you're just hearing them. Like, you need to pause and go look up all the references. And there's still things, even when you can read things. And it's this abridged version that's presented to be accessible to the modern public with a lot of moody cinematography. And, you know, I really thought that was a well done version. But reading Shakespeare is like reading philosophy, which is not for everyone. But I don't know. I don't want to say any more here. Al, do you want to give your...
No, I just think it's really... I think it's funny that you say Shakespeare should be read, because that's like the antithesis of the received wisdom, because it's like every old, like, hoary old thespian will tell you it's meant to be spoken and heard. And I think that's the case. Honestly, I haven't seen that adaptation, but I think if you have to turn on subtitles, that's a damning indictment of the choices in that adaptation. I mean, something that Hamnet like talks about is the choice of language and the expression. I didn't mention actually, and wanted to, that Paul Mescal gets to do the most actor masturbating scene I think I've ever seen, in which he gets to play William Shakespeare telling all the actors how to really act Shakespeare. And he says, no, you're just like, but he says the crucial point, which is you're just mouthing the words. And Shakespeare does have to be heard and read, because it's not about the words. It's about the skill of the actor to use those words to embody and express long, complicated, torturous emotions. That's what's wonderful about Shakespeare. I'm a bit of a Shakespeare nerd. And one of the things I feel very strongly is that if you feel like you have to either know the story or have read it or be following along a script when you're watching the adaptation, then the adaptation's not doing its job properly. The poetry should hit you in the moment. It shouldn't be something that you need to follow the sense of. It should be like the emotional story playing out in front of you should be clear as crystal, even if you don't understand word for word what's being said.
A high school play is how I've seen The Tempest. It was a high school play with my nephew in it doing this. And like, okay, I sort of know what happened. I mean, I generally know what happened scene to scene for the most part and can keep track of the characters. but there's obviously so much being said that I'm not getting that. It's just like I'm, as if I was watching something in Spanish and I know enough Spanish to kind of get the sense of it. And I can certainly figure out from their expressions. Oh, you don't have to know what they're saying every word. Their acting should sell it for bullshit. Now, to actually get what you're supposed to get out of something, you should be able to actually understand it.
I completely agree.
I have a story about this. I am not a Shakespeare nerd. I've read plenty of Shakespeare and I've seen plenty of Shakespeare. But the one time when I got really, really connected to Shakespeare was I took a class, an acting class. It was a voice class and it was called Shakespeare's Voice, Acting Through Shakespeare's Voice. And I really got the sense of sort of doing both of what you're talking about, Mark, which was really delving into the poetry of the words themselves and then figuring out emotionally what those meant. And that combination for me made it really fun. I mean, that was really, really fun. Even just, breaking down a sonnet, and figuring out what it means and then being able to act it out emotionally made me really, really connect with it. And I think that's why I definitely prefer watching it so that you can see the whole thing. But I think understanding not just what the words mean, but where all of the inflections are and how they're meant to be spoken was the key for me to understanding the text better.
I don't know if I agree with Al there. Well, maybe I do. I'm a huge fan of Shakespeare, love Shakespeare. I don't typically go the orthodox approach. Like Romeo and Juliet's fine, Hamlet's fine, but I tend to like...
Hamlet's fine.
Hamlet's fine.
It is fine.
New York Times.
It is fine. But my favorite is Othello, and maybe that's because I'm a black person and I like what he's doing with race in that particular play. But the thing, though, for me is I think that's a
good one.
I think it's a great one, man.
It's a good play.
It's really good, dude. It's my favorite.
That's the thing where you just like think about Shakespeare. That's really good, isn't it?
It's really good.
And it's really good.
And it's amazing that he understands race and he plays off race in the way that he does in that time period. Anyway, but the point, but of course I'm a scholar of African American history and culture. But anyway, but the point is that I think that Al is right that you should be able to watch a Shakespeare play and kind of pick up on what's happening by the acting and all that kind of stuff. But I also think that the words are so beautiful that I agree with Mark that turning on subtitles oftentimes is fruitful. So I think both of you are right, actually. And I would argue, pound for pound, and this may be a hot take, I think that Denzel Washington might be one of the best actors to put Shakespeare on screen, because in between Much Ado About Nothing from back in the 90s and Macbeth, which he came out in 2021, he's really good. Al, I would say you need to watch that. It is so good.
I'll watch that Macbeth, yeah.
It is so good what he does. Anyway, and Cohen is good as a director in that. But the point, nevertheless, is that I really like Shakespeare. I am more in love with the words, I think, though, than I am with the performance of how people perform it. And so I tend to kind of go Mark's route, where I really enjoy turning on the subtitles, watching it, reading it, getting deep into the language, getting deep into what he's doing. Because one of the things that is brilliant to me about Shakespeare is that he's able to tell interesting, innovative stories, but also have so much beautiful language in the story at the same time. That, for me, is what makes him really, really remarkable. So I have a really close relationship with Shakespeare. I have a really interesting relationship with Shakespeare films, because Shakespeare in Love, the Gwyneth Paltrow film, is one of my favorite films of all time.
Yeah, so let's talk about more of those,
talk about
these biographical ones. Almost invariably, because we don't know much about Shakespeare's life, including Hamnet,
play around
much,
with it,
yeah, much more than so these other ones. It's like, let's steal from his plays to give us the thematic things that are going to happen on screen here, and have women dressed as men and mistaken identity and goofy things like that.
And it's silly, but I thought that within the context of that, it's a really cute non-manipulative love story. I noticed the non-manipulative part. But no, seriously, I just thought it was a really cute love story. I don't know if Gwyneth Paltrow should have won the Oscar for Best Actress for that film. I mean, it's whatever. But it's just fun. It's a fun film. It's silly, but it's also light and enjoyable. I really enjoyed that film. And so I don't mind, because Shakespeare is such a blank slate for so many of us, I don't mind people projecting ideas onto his life and trying to do fun, interesting, sometimes silly, sometimes sweet things with his life in the context of film.
Well, there's so little that we know about Shakespeare or Anne Hathaway. There's so little that we know about them, and especially the time period that Hamnet takes place. That's kind of a bit of a blank slate, and you got to give Maggie O'Farrell props, the novelist, for the research that she did during that time. And I think part of it was in response to stories like Shakespeare in Love, where Agnes is portrayed as this evil, mean, unsexy woman that he doesn't want to be with, you know? And I kind of appreciated that Agnes was herself as a character. She's the one who drove the story in Hamnet, and she's the one, and she has agency, she has wisdom, and she is a really, really keen observer to the human condition, just as her husband is. And I liked Shakespeare in Love just as much as the next person, but I didn't really appreciate, especially after watching Hamnet, how the Anne Hathaway character is just kind of cast away as like, she's a shrew.
Yeah, I'd forgotten he was married in that movie, because that's an odd trick. Because you could have just fantasized away the wife for that period of his life, but they chose to have the shrewish version of Anne Hathaway there.
Make her mean. Sure.
Yeah.
I hadn't been aware of this film, All Is True, from 2018. It's a Kenneth Branagh film. So this is sort of the follow-up, that Hamnet is dead. He's written his last play. The theater is burned down. He's come home. And it's, how is he dealing with reintegrating? His wife has resented him for being gone all these years. They sort of resent the fact that he's now just freshly, apparently, mourning Hamnet when they all had to do that while he was gone, living in this place for so long. And his Ian McKellen comes and apparently plays the guy that Shakespeare had written his sonnets to. And so he sort of makes a little bit of a gay pass between two very elderly gentlemen toward Ian McKellen. So that's a little fun thing in there. And it's just, what his relation. And then it has a very, I don't want to give away this part, but it has a different take on, he's like, how did Hamnet really die? I've looked at the records here and it says the plague. You told me it was the plague, but that means like he's the only one in town that would have died of the plague at that time. So you must be making something else. So there's a whole, I think, kind of offensive alternate historical premise of how it was really Shakespeare's pressure on his own son that led to his demise, and it was not the plague. But yeah, did anybody else see that one?
Did not see that.
No, and I'm not gonna. That sounds like a really mean movie.
I'm very happy I didn't watch it.
Way to sell it, Mark.
Well, actually, so that was written by Ben Elton, who Al, I'm sure, knows who that is.
Tracks. Yeah. He wrote Blackadder, is his most famous thing. And really the only great thing he's
very
ever done.
serious drama that Kenneth Branagh took, but then also wrote the sitcom that I had seen the first season of before I didn't end up watching any more of it, Upstart Crow, a BBC sitcom that I think is great.
Yeah.
Because it's using in the sitcom live in front of an audience or laugh track or something format, all the goofy stuff of like, they run into some hijinks, and you can see how this plot is taken from. So, the one that I just watched, Shakespeare's on trial, and he's gotten suckered into this wager or this deal where he's going to owe, since he can't pay back a pound of money, he's going to have to pay a pound of flesh. And his lawyer says, but does the contract says you can have any blood? Which Shakespeare play is this from?
That's The Merchant of Venice.
The Merchant of Venice. And the judge is just like, no, that's completely
most
stupid.
Anti-Semitic play.
That's completely stupid. If you buy a pound of flesh at the butcher, of course you get the blood with it. That's just as stupid. And his wife says at the end, like, if one of your plays, the end of it, really a meaningful outcome depended on this stupid argument that your lawyer made, that would be really bad writing, wouldn't it? And he's like, well, maybe I could just mix it with a lot of iambic pentameter. It would be funny. It's like, you're the genius. That's okay. So
Wow.
The fact that Ben Elton did both of those things, the comedian who did the young ones and these other things also did this All Is True. Maybe that's a reason, Al, for you to give it your time.
No, I tried Upstart Crow because it is the kind of thing. I really love David Mitchell, who's the lead in it, and everyone involved is great. It's just that the laugh track isn't the right. It's very old, feels very old fashioned now, to the point where it's slightly painful to have a laugh track in a sitcom.
I have a couple other things on my list, but I feel like I'm monologuing here. Any other thoughts about sort of would we be fascinated by this if we actually knew more about his background? Or,
I mean, that's the whole point. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
I feel like we just don't really know enough.
Yeah, we don't know enough. And actually, I kind of prefer it that way. I mean, if I'm being honest, I don't want to know more about him. I just want to enjoy his art independent of his life story. I don't want to go deep into his backstory because I do enjoy his art. I think he's a wonderful artist and a wonderful storyteller and very influential storyteller and a very talented writer. And I'm happy that I'm able to just enjoy his art independent of what was going on in his life. Now, his life is interesting to research and to think about, but I'm okay not knowing much about him.
I think one of the points of Hamnet, the movie, was that it is genuinely we know everything we need to know about him through his plays, and like whatever the realities of Shakespeare's life were, the important thing is that he expressed those realities through incredibly beautiful things.
Like, imagine if we found out about his life and he would have been a Trump supporter. That would have, that would have changed, our appreciation of his art. Like, I don't want to know, what he thought about certain kinds of things. His art, I think, and I don't think he would have been Trump supported by his art anyway, but I think his art does enough, and I'm happy that I got it.
We know he was a bit of a fawning toady, right? He was always trying to keep the monarchs happy.
So I also watched Bill, which was a film by the people that did Horrible Histories and the British version of Ghosts, which the internet is telling me they're sometimes this troupe is referred to as the Six Idiots.
Yes.
So I really like the British version of Ghosts. I hope we talk about Ghosts sometime. And this Bill film, it's not quite Monty Python level, but it tries. And it's dealing with that same, Hamnet is still alive, early part of his life. And so I think playing around with this thing is exactly the right, if you're a Shakespeare fan, if you're a British person. I did not get to see this TNT 2017 one season series Will, but I just was reading about it. Apparently it is American made. And at least this Guardian review says its Luhrmann-esque histrionics feel out of place and out of touch. So it uses a lot of punk rock and what a badass, which it reminded me of the whole Teen Jesus. Did we talk about this? The Teen Jesus. It's on the Righteous Gemstones. The last season has a thing where one of the characters is trying to have a show about Teen Jesus called Teen Jesus, where it's really bad, where Jesus is really badass. I just
really
thought funny. Yes, I think
it's one of the best seasons of that show. It's really funny.
So, but it's a better idea to play with in like that format than to actually maybe have a whole series about Shakespeare or about Jesus that actually tries to do this. Like it's just my guess. So I was watching those movies instead of watching more actual Shakespeare.
Do you think that Hamnet would have worked if there was no Shakespeare involved? Do you think that this would have been just a fine standalone story?
No, because it's a film about drama.
Why?
And tragedy. Because it's a film about Shakespearean tragedy, and if it wasn't about Shakespeare, it would only be about half of what it's about.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
I guess as a concluding thought, Shakespeare is taken, we're forced to read it in school. Maybe you become a fan of it. Again, I put it in the same category as philosophy, that like, oh, well, that's something that I'm into, but I know a lot of people that are not into this. So I feel like most of these presentations for popular consumption are trying to sell you on the idea of Shakespeare. Like, you really like that presentation of those two scenes from Hamlet, right? Well, maybe you want to actually watch a real film. Let's put some young and hot people and do a version of Much Ado About Nothing or whatever the thing is, Romeo and Juliet. And this will sell you on Shakespeare in general. And definitely this Coen Brothers thing was like, we're going to sorry, the clone brother.
Yeah, it's just one of them.
But that version of Macbeth was, we're going to sort of film this and use our, it's going to be a little like Fargo, but it's Shakespeare's words, insofar as we could fit them in an hour and 45 minutes. I'm not sure how much of the play was deleted to get us to this point. Would you be bummed if Hamnet was Best Picture, given that it is sort of, in a way, a commercial for Shakespeare?
If it won Best
No?
Picture?
What?
Yes.
I don't know what you're asking, Mark. I'm really not clear.
I'm saying that a film like Hamnet is
Okay.
less, this is to answer Sarah's question. I think it is less a meditation unto itself and a wonderful piece of art in itself by, how great Shakespeare is? Here, let me try to explore some of the emotions that Shakespeare has inspired in me, or that I can imaginatively stick onto Shakespeare, that you modern people can get. And so, as well as enjoying this movie, hopefully you will go home being more eager to read, listen to, watch actual Shakespeare.
I think that's one of the effects, plausibly. I don't think it's a commercial for Shakespeare is a little harsh. It's certainly the sense in which it's Oscar bait, and that I don't disagree with Lawrence at all, is that it falls into the category of art about art, which is always, critics and award panels.
God, they love
it. Yeah. Movies about movies, music about music, books about writing books. Let's have it. Let's have it all.
That's the reason why the artist won that year, and it was a travesty.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
And this is a movie about a book about writers, so it falls into that bucket. Given that, it's one of the best versions of that I've seen, I think.
Oh my goodness, I disagree so much.
I can't
believe how much I disagree with you.
I mean, interestingly, it is because I'm not kind of wanker too. So there's a lot of my favorite things are things about things.
Well, the fact that you as a big Shakespeare fan don't think this is a debauched for the public version, that says something to me.
No, not at all. And also, I'm the kind of Shakespeare buff who thinks that not really, but I'm the kind of Shakespeare fan who tries to remember that Shakespeare was A, massively popular at the time, that B, everybody at the time was basically illiterate, and everyone went there and had a great time. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gone back and it wouldn't have been a successful enterprise. So this is where when just to get back to the discussion about seeing it versus reading it, that's why I come down so heavily on that side.
Good point. That's a really good point.
Because yes, you can read it, and there's loads there, and there's loads of different ways that you can engage in the material, but they're all bonuses. If you want to understand Shakespeare as why he's a big deal in the first place, helps to understand that he was a big deal in the context of people could barely hear what the actors were saying on stage. People did not have scripts in front of them. People did not talk like Shakespeare characters in the 16th century. The barriers to entry were there for those people, and it was still enormously successful. So
that's a really compelling argument, actually.
So on the modern adaptation thing, some of them I really like. Some of them I like. Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet is terrific, but a lot of other adaptations are boring. And I'm not sure I know exactly why some work and some don't, because Baz Luhrmann is not faithful to Romeo and Juliet.
Not
but
at
it's
all,
a great
but I love
adaptation.
it. I really love it. Yeah,
so I don't know what the magic formula is. I just get suspicious when I feel like people are trying to gild the lily, because it's some of the greatest drama that's ever been written. It's lasted 400 years. Shakespeare doesn't need your help to be relevant, like young up-and-coming director. Trust the material. For God's sake, trust the material.
Shakespeare was all about these universal themes that have obviously withstood the test of time. Hamnet is actually not a story about Will, but it's a story about his wife. But at the same time, it made me want to go back and revisit Hamlet the play, revisit Lear, revisit Winter's Tale, revisit some of these plays that play with some of the same themes that I'm seeing in a fictionalized version of his wife's life.
Man, Lear's a good one.
A Winter's Tale is bad. That's so far. I saw that live once and it was joyously awful play.
Watch the film if you want to see really good performances, but understand that this film will utterly gut you. And it's very manipulative. And that's the point that it's trying to do. And just walk in understanding that. And I will never watch this film ever again. So watch it at your own peril.
I would watch it again.
Oh my gosh. You like to cry.
It's one of those things that I feel like if I knew where it was going, I would have liked it better. Obviously, I knew where it was going in general, but like I didn't know that it would have that emotional arc and that uplifting thing. And I kind of want to revisit it, going through the grueling part, knowing where it's going, rather than just dwelling in the grueling. Anyway,
so you listened to it after you watched it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Have at it.
Also, if this movie wins Oscars, it is 2 hours and 5 minutes long, the runtime. And let's just have more of that, please.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's going to win Best Actress. I would be shocked if it wins much else than that.
Let's see. But then Chloe Zhao's next project is the remake of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so I am more and more and more excited about that.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Pretty Much Pop is part of the Partially Examined Life podcast network. Get more Pretty Much Pop at prettymuchpop.com. Get bonus content for every episode at patreon.com/prettymuchpop.